Whoops! It's Wizard and the Bruiser. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the tragic comedy that is Wizard and the Bruiser. I'm your Bruiser. That's not to be confused with the loser, Holt McNeely.
And I am the wizard, Jake Young.
Roll 20, and you get to cast the sex spell.
Critical boning.
That's right. A lot of critical boning will be happening on this week's podcast. We've got the ladies' favorite on the docket tonight. That's right. It's Neil Gaiman.
Oh, the Britishman?
The Britishman, indeed. He comes from the crazy land of Britain where they have scones and a tea time every day at 3 o'clock.
I never quite understood as a kid whether or not his name was Neil Gaiman or Gaiman.
Gaiman?
Both are just very manly names.
Yeah, it was always Gaiman, and I always made fun of him for it. He has the word gay in his name. That's not true at all, actually.
I mean, if we're going to make fun of any British comic figure, we should make fun of Michael Moorcock.
Yes, Michael Moorcock. Michael Slave Boy Moorcock has got to be the worst name for a comic book writer. And, of course, his penciler, Dr. Pedophile, which was, I don't know why you wouldn't change that. First of all, what kind of parents gives their kid a first name Doctor? I'll tell you why they do it. It's that they'll raise a young doctor, right? So I get that part, but the last name, I understand, because back in the day it was like if you were Shoeman, that usually meant you were like a shoemaker or something like that. So of course we know the lineage there, but I still feel bad for I can't believe I'm still talking about this made-up person.
We I mean, have you ever read 2000 AD? Like, it's probably in there somewhere.
Absolutely. It's definitely in there. It's in there 4 or 5 times. So I'll tell you what, I bashed my brains against some Neil Gaiman information. It's been a while since I visited the wonderful world of Neil Gaiman. I think the last book of his I read was Good Omens, which was a while ago. I would say it was several years ago. But I was definitely a huge fan. He definitely was a part of the dream team that brought me back into comic books when I was in college. Him, Alan Moore, Frank Miller, was like, because I collected comic books and read, like, I read really bad comic books when I was young, like Ghost Rider and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? Just anything. I saw a flaming skull on the front of a comic book and I was like, ooh, give me that. And I would just kind of start reading them. And then in 5th grade, I changed schools and I met my, now good old friend Pat Daly, and he sat me down and he was like, you can't collect comic books anymore. That's not cool. Music's cool. Here's some Nirvana. And he essentially saved my life in a lot of ways. But I put them down for a long time. But I remember, and we'll get to it soon, I'm sure, but obviously Sandman is the most well-known comic book series that Neil Gaiman is known for. Have you read any Sandman, Jake?
I have never read any Sandman. It's like just this looming, because now it's like complete. You can get it in all these like giant absolute editions. Mm-hmm. And, like, I'm scared. I'm honestly scared I'll like it too much. Like, you'll just see me just, like, wearing, like, Ankh necklaces and, like, and wearing tattered black everything.
Yeah, it's real gothy. It's real fun. I mean, Marcus, you were a big Sandman fan. We got to bring you into this episode a little bit more. I'm sorry about your whole situation. Marcus has a big back tattoo of Morpheus, a.k.a. Dream, a.k.a. Sandman.
It's so big.
It's so huge. It takes up his whole back. I will say, though, of all my friends with Sandman tattoos, you have the best one.
Really?
Oh, absolutely.
Wait, what's the worst one?
In case he listens, I don't want to talk.
Mr. F.
He or she?
He or it's a he. What is it, too? It should be a she. It was a lady. Well, we'll get to it later. We'll say it right now. It was especially prevalently popular with females in college. Mm-hmm. Was what really made Sandman take off. People who don't normally read comic books. He really broke the mold in a lot of ways in terms of getting people into comics, including myself. Yes, but yeah, you loved Sandman. You wanted to suck his dick. You loved it, right?
If his dick was real, it probably would have found its way near my mouth.
Right now, what was
or the personification of dicks?
Right,
starts with a D. He would have fit right in the pantheon.
That's the thing. It's all about abstract dicks, abstract ways of thinking. I don't know.
I really I was kind of a gothy type of kid. I loved the story. I was very ethereal at the time. Yes. I also like the idea of dreams and the collective unconsciousness and all that. Like, a lot of that stuff really does speak to me. Yes. And stuff that I still believe to this day.
It holds up.
It totally. I mean, It's pretty fucking poncy at times.
Floofy doofy, for
It's
sure.
at times it's very floofy doofy.
Are you talking about the Shakespeare, the Midsummer Night's Dream?
No, that's great.
A great one,
yeah,
right?
it's good. It's very floofy doofy, but
In a nutshell, I honestly don't know what the plot of Sandman is.
It's kind of fucking hard to it's big. And I think, one thing I will say about like why I felt like Sandman was so brilliant when I read it at the time was because I think it's a 10 trade comic, right?
11. No, it is 10.
10 trades, right? Trades 1 through 8 were a seemingly sort of random assortment of different small stories. Trade 9 kind of just wrapped the whole thing up, brought everything back, did it in such a brilliant way that I didn't find the series to be brilliant until Trade 9. And then I was like, oh my God, this is a masterful storytelling example of storytelling right here, right?
Like, you know how there's a lot like shows like Battlestar Galactica and Lost, they start off really strong because the guys don't really know where the story is going. And then once they get to the end, they just kind of fuck it up because they've been making it as they go along. But like Neil Gaiman, he admits that at the beginning he had no idea where the story was going to actually go, but he was a good enough writer to bring all those threads together in a way. He was able to put the puzzle together, whereas so many of these guys that start off with nothing have no idea how to do, but he knows how to do it.
But he asked us what the plot was, so let us try to start with the very beginning. Dream is like being reborn at the beginning, or
no, he's captured by an Aleister Crowley type.
He's captured by an Aleister Crowley type, correct? Right, and he needs to escape. Right, he needs
bald head, huge erection.
And it kind of starts like a video game. Like he has to regain these different, like he has a mask and he's got these different magical artifacts. He then has to go and reobtain.
Yeah,
right.
He has to go. He has a mask that is made from a dead god. He has a ruby that is his dream ruby, and he has.
I'm sold.
Don't you dare laugh!
I will know.
Don't you dare laugh while we talk
Fucking,
about.
I'm dead. You just said the magic words. I didn't know. Dream ruby.
Dream ruby, baby.
It's called the Matteropticon.
I needed you so bad for this, Marcus, because I don't remember half of this shit.
I mean, I've read it so many times. Like, I've read it so many fucking times.
I kind of plan to reread it. I got the first few trades, and I started working through it. I tried to turn my lady Lexi onto it, but I can't get her to like anything I like. But that's a completely different.
That's a different episode.
That's a different
Lexi
podcast.
episode.
Yeah, I think it's a completely different podcast.
And this third little thing is a little bag of sand. But that's actually really cool because he goes.
Is it called the bag of sand?
Bag of sand, little bag of sand. I think that's the first truly great issue of that series is that's when they bring John Constantine into it, because John Constantine has gotten a hold of this bag of sand. He had an ex-girlfriend steal it off of him, and when they found her, she had just been using this bag of like dream sand as a drug, and it was like barely keeping her alive, and she was using it so much that like this house had essentially become a living nightmare and had like eaten her father. And when they finally
really
found her,
cool.
she was just covered in sores, just sitting in bed.
Well, and I think another element that you probably turned you on greatly was it's heavy elements of horror mixed into this floofy doofy world and everything. Also, we should mention too that it centers around the endless, which is sort of like how would you describe the endless? It's not gods. It's like more fundamental than gods.
Ideas,
concepts, and those were of course Death, who became wildly popular. She had
even I know Death, the cute goth chick.
Yes, the cute goth chick had her own run of comic books,
which is great. Yeah, there's the first one. Well, there were two miniseries. There was the first one and then the High Cost of Living, both of which were really good.
Both really good. And kind of need to go back and read those. And is there anything to say about Death other than she was a badass goth chick?
Yeah, she was just like a really cute goth chick, like, hi, I'm Death. And like everyone was like, oh, okay, cool, I'll die.
I really loved
God, so 90s.
Oh, it gets more 90s than that. I really loved Desire a lot. Desire was neither a man nor a woman. She was kind of anything you wanted her to be, the most beautiful thing in the world, right? Essentially. Am I tell me if I'm wrong, by the way, because this is all based on just a distant recollection.
Yeah, no, I mean, Desire is like, it's what do you call it? Androgynous being that lives in the heart of a gigantic statue of him herself, and it's really fun. I mean, she can make anybody want anything.
I can't believe that Neil Gaiman actually predicted Tilda Swinton's rise to fame.
Dude, totally looks like Tilda Swinton.
Yeah. Super looks like Tilda.
real short,
well,
like,
David
wear
Bowie.
suits.
I
Yeah.
mean, it
It's
was
a very
totally,
David- yeah, it's
it
a
was
very
totally
Bowie character.
modeled after Bowie,
Yeah,
right? In a lot of
absolutely.
ways. Then Despair was a pretty good manifestation of depression, I would think.
What was Despair?
Naked fat chick.
Yeah, big upset fat girl.
Yeah, she has rats. Like, and the rats will come and
Wasn't
like,
she always
chew on
like
her face.
cutting herself?
Yeah, she's
or
got
something?
a little like hook ring she constantly cuts herself
Yeah,
with.
that she's always like cutting her face with.
Yeah, and her realm is just a bunch of mirrors in which she can watch people despair. They get like it's like she sits in one of these is like she sits and watches a grocery store manager stare at a gun as his wife goes to the police with the pictures he took with their son. Pedophile pictures. And it's what was it? He stares at the gun, wondering if he has the courage to pull the trigger. He doesn't.
You know, another name I don't understand from way back in the day, pedophile pictures. Why would you name your kid that? Anyway.
Wait, I'm sorry. This was like in a fucking DC comic book?
Yes.
It was Vertigo.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
But like, did it also have ads for like Green Lantern, the Parallax? Like,
all of those did. Yeah. I mean, it's no worse than anything that was in like Preacher or The Invisibles or any of the like later Swamp Thing runs.
check out Wave Rider #3. Like, what the fuck? It's insane.
And it was actually originally created. The character Sandman was actually he took this old superhero character that was created back
he's in
in
the
like
Justice
the 40s.
Society.
Yeah, Wesley Dodds.
He wore a green business suit, a fedora, and a gas mask, and used a gun emitting sleeping gas to sedate criminals. Later, he was put in a unitard cowl, and I love his sidekick name. Can you guess it?
Sandman?
Sandy.
Ooh, that's...
Yeah. Oh, I can't remember what his name was when he came back in the 90s in JSA. I think he changed his name to like Geoforce.
Yeah.
That was Geoforce? That's hilarious.
Maybe not Geoforce. I can't. Something
G-Force.
really dumb like
Yeah,
that.
Damage? Was he Damage? I remember Damage.
No, but Damage came back, I think, as turned into Nucleon, and then he turned into the original Atom Smasher, I think.
Guys, comic books are great, and anyone who says otherwise, I will punch very ineffectively.
There you go. And I'll watch it. I'll sit and watch it.
My knowledge of comic books like ends extremely. It's like from a period of like 1994 to 2006. I know everything.
Do you need to know anything before or after that period, though?
I mean, you can read like Crisis on Infinite Earths is pretty good. And there's some good like early '80s stuff, like the concept, like the Hellblazer stuff is really fucking good.
Yeah.
All the Judge Dredd stuff before that is like really. There's a lot of really great stuff in the 80s
the thing
and 70s,
is
70s and 80s.
Like, it's something happened in the 80s and 90s where, like, after so many years of like the Comics Code Authority and like all these like heavy restrictions on what can be in a comic book, they just brought in all these British dudes from 2000 AD, and now it's like, and it was Alan Moore and Grant Morrison, and Neil Gaiman was kind of like this weird. He was like part of that generation, but also like way younger than all of them.
Well, yeah, I mean, he actually looked up to Alan Moore. He was an idol of his who later became a good friend of his who kind of shepherded him into the comic books. He actually said that he was at some, I can't even find it, whatever. He was at some train station and he picked up a copy of, I think, Swamp Thing. Yes. In 1984, he picked up a copy of Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, which inspired him to go to London's Forbidden Planet and start buying comics. Forbidden Planet, of course, being the shop that I didn't know existed that long.
Yeah.
In the same year, he wrote his first book, which was a biography of the band Duran Duran.
That is the most Neil Gaiman thing I've ever heard in my entire.
Right?
Oh, look at what I did today.
And he actually, Neil Gaiman was sort of a semi-research assistant for Alan Moore during the writing of The Watchmen.
Oh.
He helped him come up with some of those quotes that he used at the beginning of each comic chapter. He'd be like, this is what the issue is about. Do you think you could, come up with a quote? And he'd go dig up quotes for him and stuff and kind of helped him out a little bit in the making of The Watchmen. It was one of my favorite things I learned in researching about this. I love The Watchmen.
Yeah.
It was like The Watchmen and Sandman kind of brought me back to comic books in college.
But okay, so here's the thing,
And
though,
weed.
is that of all these comic book guys, like Neil, of all these British like weirdos, like there's Alan Moore, who's just like basically become just a bog troll,
Snake Wizard.
Please,
Snake
a
wizard.
warlock.
A warlock. It's just like all movies are crap and everything's crap and fucking. What if Wendy from fucking Peter Pan fucked Dorothy? Like,
I have Lost Girls, by the way. I own it. Yeah.
And did Lexi like that?
She did.
Oh, okay.
She did like that. She likes stuff like that.
Grant Morrison's just doing fucking like mushrooms in the middle of a castle, far away from anything. But like Neil Gaiman's the one that's just like he'll show up at your Barnes and Noble. Like he's like real slick.
Well, I mean, he's married to Amanda Palmer of the Dresden Dolls, formerly of the Dresden Dolls. Either way, and I actually got to be backstage with her and Neil Gaiman during Kurt Braunhalter's show back when he used to do that here, his late night show.
God, I got high in your room and stared at that poster so many
right,
times.
because I got Amanda Palmer to sign it, and I was going to get Neil Gaiman to sign my copy of Clash of Kings as a funny joke, but I didn't get the balls up to do that. So I didn't.
He'd be down for that.
I know, right? Well, I also, it was one of those where it was like, I had Amanda Palmer sign the poster that I had because it was her face on the thing. And then it was like, well, the night's about her doing a performance. He was just there to support her. And I felt like it would be kind of dicky to be like, but really, Mr. Gaiman, plus I was so I can't stand that stuff.
Yeah.
I was so nervous to be near him. It was like totally weird.
That's the trick is you just act like you belong.
Yeah, completely.
And you'd be like, as someone that belongs here, I think it's funny to do this with you.
Right? Yeah, at least it feels good to be like backstage, hanging out, and I'm not supposed to. I'm not like about to get removed by security, so that was kind of fun.
No, the one move I do to prove that I'm not intimidated by a celebrity if I'm on a show with them is just when they get off stage to go, don't listen to those assholes. I thought you did great out there.
I just throw my Nintendo 3DS at them and run away. Just be like, I gotta catch them all, and then run out.
How many Nintendo 3DSs have you bought?
About 14. I've seen 13 famous people in my lifetime. Or, well, since the Nintendo 3DS came out. Before that, it was Game Boy Color. I skipped the Game Boy Advance generation, so before that, it was Game Boy Color. Before that, it was Game Boy Pocket. And then before that, it was the OG Game Boy.
Is that why you were asking me for shoe money last week?
Yes, absolutely. Well, that and crack. But anyways, so yeah, back to the endless. I feel like I'm having OCD right now. I want to finish the list out of the endless, right? So there was I can't remember a couple of what these looked like, so maybe you can help me. Destiny?
Yeah, Destiny was the oldest of, or was it Destiny or Death that was the oldest? Destiny was the one who had his own garden. He had a big robe on that was always over his eyes. He was constantly reading from a gigantic
big book. Yes.
Yeah, that was chained to him.
Yes.
Yeah. And
really cool personification.
Yeah.
Daddy, I like that imagery.
Yes, Destiny knows what all that was, all that is, and most of what will be.
That's such a Neil Gaiman thing. Is that like darkness, whimsy?
Exactly. Well, shit. I have to bring up despair then, delirium, because that's exactly what that is. She used to be delight. Now she's delirium, and she. What I love is her word bubbles. She always talks in like multicolored lettering and stuff, and she's just always kind of talking complete nonsense. Very heavily based off of Tori Amos, I believe.
Yeah, oh yeah, totally.
And of course, Neil Gaiman. Well, maybe people don't know this. I didn't know this till I researched it. He's really good friends with Tori Amos. She references him in several of her songs, and references Delirium.
How does she reference Neil Gaiman?
She's just hanging with Neil by the tree, and he apparently made her a talking tree in one of his books. It's all this silly artist shit.
That's like a '90s cultural power couple at that point.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Like if George R.R. Martin and like Taylor Swift just hung out together at this point.
Yeah, we're just fucking 69ing each other and fucking, and made Taylor Swift a fucking boar in one of his books, kills one of the kings or whatever. He made her a talking tree in something, and
Delirium's like a 13, 14-year-old girl, somewhere around there, stringy hair, but she changes it up a lot. Yeah, she can pretty much change in anything. She can make anyone go crazy. Yeah, one time, she's driving down the road. She's like, I'm a good driver, but she's on the wrong side of the road. And the state trooper pulls her over and says, tarnation, what are you doing? Starts yelling at her. And so she just makes him feel like he has bugs on his skin for the rest of his life because he's doing his job. unpredictable.
Hey, Holden, real quick. Like, hold on. I don't think Marcus can hear us. What if we just change the podcast to Marcus retells Neil Gaiman stories?
No, right? It's so much
Marcus
better this way.
reads Sandman.
I'm so happy that he's here because I wouldn't be able to do. And this is so much better. His synopsis is so much better than Wikipedia's. You should write your own Marcus's page, Parks's pages, Park page, and it'll just be murderers and floofy dude Neil Gaiman comic books. And then there was Destruction, which I can't. Again, it's the only one that I can't remember besides.
Destruction was the only one of the endless to actually retire.
Right.
He retired about 200 years before the book actually occurred. He's a big, tall, red-headed guy that lives in Greece with his talking dog Barnabas.
Yes.
And Barnabas is a salty dog.
But let's take a trip back in time. I know, right? To Neil Gaiman's beginnings.
Oh, I thought we were going to kill Hitler, but okay, yeah, let's go with your idea.
Hey, every time, if anybody asks me if I had a time machine, it's two things. It's go back in time and meet Neil Gaiman as a young child and murder Hitler.
If you murder Hitler, we never would have had Saving Private Ryan.
Or maybe Neil Gaiman. Who knows? Maybe his parents wouldn't have gotten horny enough to fuck if there was a peace in humanity up until then. Right? That makes sense, right? Everything I'm saying makes sense right now, right? He was born in 1960 in Portchester, Hampshire, then moved to the West Sussex town of East Grinstead. I say that
Could you say that in a goofier accent?
He's born in Portchester, Hampshire, then he moved to the West Sussex town of East Grinstead, yeah? And if you take a left at West Grinstead, you'll get to the Post Hampshire Port. Post Hampshire Port has the best burgers. He has two younger sisters, which probably is a good indication why he was able to kind of write for women's likings so much. Yeah. Again, a sentence that I feel like would be better said, formatted in a different way than I said it.
Yeah. He but is able to write women in such a way that other women are able to relate to the characters.
Yeah, in college. A lot of college.
Always in college.
Looking back at it, it's like, man, this was so written for women in college.
Yeah, it really was. No,
it
was
Sarah Lawrence ass fucking chicks.
Dude, didn't matter if it was Sarah Lawrence or Texas Tech, man. Because I worked at a comic book store in college, and my whole thing was turning college kids on to comic books. You know, like
were there any cuties that were all through there?
Oh,
yeah. They show you their bush. Still got it. Still got it.
Oh, I'm in a comic book store. Oh, all these toys are making me horny. Oh,
they did make you horny though, Marcus.
No, it was the girl that was in the
Oh, that's the way the girl talks.
Yeah, that's the way the girl talks.
And then you rung up your Transmetropolitan graphic novel.
No, man, I could someone walks in the door. Yeah, that's what it was. It's like, is this a Sandman person, Transmetropolitan, preacher?
Which weird British guy are you?
Exactly. Yeah, which weird British guy are you going to be into?
They're all fucking British, man.
No, I'm telling you, like that generation, they're like comic books in Britain, like even humor magazines, they have actual teeth. Like there's actual like they can be degenerate.
They're crooked though.
So they had to bring in all these fucking ringers to use to actually like make anything good with these old characters, because they were just throwing garbage characters.
Well, and that's what happened with Sandman was that the Karen Berger, who would later become the head of DC Comics Vertigo, she literally went up to Neil Gaiman after he had written a limited series called Black Orchid and said, "Hey, I don't know what Black Orchid's about." She said, "Hey, take the Sandman, use only the name, do whatever you want with the property."
Is this the same time that Grant Morrison got Animal Man and also went fucking nuts with it?
Yeah, around that same time. I think Animal Man.
I need to read that.
I think that was before Neil Gaiman came around. I think that was before. I think so. Yeah, but it was around the same time, late '80s.
Okay. Yeah, because was it after Alan Moore's Swamp Thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because cool. Alan Moore's Swamp Thing was, I think, 86, 87. Yeah, because I remember Swamp Thing number 32 was the first comic book I ever read. Yeah, it was great. It was the issue where there's all the little pogo guys, and then one of them gets eaten by an alligator. It's very sad, and it taught me about death at too young of an age.
I need to read that.
Comic books.
Yeah, but they were all talking silly.
Yeah,
at the same time.
one kind of crazy fact that I learned is that his parents were fucking Scientologists.
Really?
Yeah.
No, wait. I thought
His parents studied Dianetics at the Scientology Center, and one of Gaiman's sisters works for this Church of Scientology in Los Angeles. Shit. A quote from his sister was, "Most of our social activities were involved with Scientology or our Jewish family." It's a Jewish Scientology mix. It would get very confusing when people would ask my religion as a kid. I'd say, "I'm a Jewish Scientologist."
That's
Yikes.
Jake, you're the Jewish. What do you think about that?
Well, part of me is like, you don't like to hear that when a cool person is part of a terrifying weird death cult run by an insane person. But I mean, if it was early enough,
That's unfortunate.
Nerds. If it's early enough, like it became religion, like it was a gradual, gross process.
Yeah, I mean,
before it was just like The Secret.
Yeah, at that time it was more of a self-help type of thing.
Have you done last podcast on Scientology yet?
No, not yet, but I do have a good source that I just got from a dumpster in Los Angeles.
Ooh, very nice. Yeah, I think speaking of last podcast kind of black magic-y stuff, when he was able to read at the age of 4. And at the age of 10, he really liked the works of Dennis Wheatley. Are you familiar with this author?
I know that name.
He especially liked The Caw of Gifford Hillary and The Haunting of Toby Jugg.
Absolutely not. I've never heard of those books.
You
ever.
would remember.
I would remember The Haunting of Toby Jugg.
Haunting of Toby Jugg was about a disabled British airman recovering from World War II who goes to live in a castle in Wales that is run by a member of a Satanist brotherhood.
That sounds pretty fucking
Yeah,
cool.
he kind of wrote like his main characters a lot like inspired James Bond, but they always had to deal with some kind of black magic or Satanism or something like that. He wrote thrillers and occult novels and pitted his I just said that came to be considered an authority on Satanism, exorcism, and black magic. And he also joined the Ghost Club. Have you talked about the Ghost Club at all?
No.
The Ghost Club is a paranormal investigation research organization founded in London in 1862. Check out the Ghost Club.
I mean, the thing, if you just type in the Ghost Club, I don't think it's going to be the cool.
Page. They got a Wikipedia page. I'm talking about Dennis Wheatley, of course, not Neil Gaiman. Also, and the Caw of Gifford Hillary, a black magic story, is about 2 military men planning to counter Soviet-Russian aggression when Sir Gifford Hillary inexplicably witnesses his own murder. It's about a black magic cult or something.
That's pretty cool.
It's kind of cool, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how great these books are, but it really makes a lot of sense that he would be kind of obsessed with these darker, twisted things. And then, of course, he was also inspired by Lord of the Rings, The Chronicles of Narnia, and Alice's Adventure of Wonderland. Yeah, no shit, Wikipedia. Yeah, was he fucking interested in Batman? Yeah, of course he liked Batman, too. You know, it's just like, blow your brains out, Wikipedia.
Oh, no, don't. I'll have to pay for things again.
I know. Yeah. But anyways, yeah, I thought that was kind of a very interesting thing about his early childhood life.
He was a spookster.
He was a bit of a spooky boy.
Okay, so here's the thing: is like he's been in the public eye for this entire time. He's like he's a darling of like I'm sure he's like giving a talk at the Bell House in Brooklyn as we speak.
Right.
He does like a lot of pop culture stuff. A lot of his stuff is adapted into movies and TV shows. I remember every time he wrote an episode of Doctor Who was a big fucking deal.
Oh, I didn't even know he did that.
Yeah. There was the first one was one where the TARDIS itself is just inhabited by a spooky lady. Is like the TARDIS becomes just like a walking, talking lady who with like Helena Bonham Carter vibes.
Cool.
And like the Doctor's like, "Oh, I'm in love with you." And the other one was like a big Cyberman adventure that involved Willow as the Emperor of Space. What's that actor's name?
Warwick Davis.
Warwick Davis is the Emperor of Space.
Huh.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, he really kind of is the backbone of anything kind of cool fantasy, right? I mean, he made these floofy-doo things. I think floofy-doo is just the word we're using today. He made these things like hip and cool again. And, I think that's obviously why he works so well with the ladies and everything. And, of course, after we have Sandman, and some of the other comic books. That was his main comic book thing. But then he went on to write, of course, a bunch of books that are incredibly well known, starting with Good Omens with the famed fantasy writer Terry Pratchett.
Yeah, from Discworld.
Yes, from the Discworld series, a series I've been meaning to read, a comedy fantasy writer, which is pretty rare, and it got Neil Gaiman his first start. Well, I mean, obviously his first book was the Duran Duran autobiography. Look at that. I mean, everybody, that's one of your first books that they hand you in 9th grade. It's like Catch in the Rye, Neil Gaiman's Duran Duran autobiography, or biography. It's not an autobiography because he wasn't in the band Duran Duran.
I kind of admire just how much he does collaborate, how much he does reach out to people and just put himself out there, whether that's like a little bit schmoozy. You know, I keep laying on the fact that like he's this slicker spookster. Mm-hmm. Like he's in control of his image, and like he's willing to collaborate, he's willing to team up.
Well, he started off in the 1980s. He started off as a journalist, writing book reviews and doing interviews. And the reason why was so that he could just get in with all these fantasy and comic writers. That's the only reason why he did it, was so that he could get in their good graces. He wrote for the British Fantasy Society, which would probably be a fun crew to roll with. You know?
Yeah, the British Fantasy Society.
Yeah,
what
dude.
are they doing at the pub?
They get fucked up, dude.
Well, I mean, he does have some enemies. Like, do we want to get into the fucking Spawn stuff?
Oh, yeah, baby. We can get into the Spawn stuff. So, yeah, I mean, what a perfect enemy for Neil Gaiman.
Todd McFarlane.
Like,
the broiest,
opposite ends.
broiest bro dude of comic book writers.
Fucking, you know what I did, dude? I fucking made a shitload of money, and then I bought some hockey cards.
It's like a fat clown, right? But then, like, he just turns into this monster, man.
Well, it's a super cool monster. It's like, got this, like, mouth. It goes like, and then it opens up, and then there's like one fucking dude. There's like the one horn on top. But fuck, dude, there's two more on the side. Yeah.
I have to admit.
But then when he's a clown, he farts a lot.
Todd McFarlane, are you here? My God.
I don't understand the comic books. They just keep flying off the shelves. Stop reading his comic books. I mean, I have to admit, I have Spawn number like 1 through 50 back in my house.
Yeah.
And
Me too. I mean, that's why I know.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Todd McFarlane draws the way being 14 years old feels. Like everything's just sinewy and shredded and like fraying.
Super duper like it. It's just like he nailed that. Like at like what is cool when you think cool things.
Yeah,
everything's in Spawn that is just
chains,
gold,
hell,
so just spikes everywhere.
I mean, all of it. Savage Dragon. I mean, we're talking about Image Comics now. Savage Dragon, Youngbloods. I mean, nothing could be more different between that and Delirium talking to to Sandman in a gutter.
I tend my garden now.
Yeah,
for earthly affairs no longer bother me.
Sandman, which was what was it? It was originally he imagined the character as a man, young, pale, and naked, imprisoned in a tiny cell, waiting until his captors passed away, deathly thin, with long dark hair and strange eyes.
Fuck that noise! This guy's called Blade Storm.
No, dude, like my dude, like his name's fucking Al Simmons, but you know what, dude? He's black because black dudes are cool as fuck.
I mean, you won't see his face ever, but
no, you'll never see his face, and then when you do see his face, it's like all burned and shit, so you don't actually know that he's a black guy or nothing. But his fucking wife is some hot chick.
Every chick in my shit has big tits.
So how did these two darlings of the comic scene throw down?
Now, Todd McFarlane had him guest write an issue of Spawn. That's how they ended up throwing down. He guest wrote an issue of Spawn. He introduced 3 characters: Angela, Cagliostro, and Medieval Spawn.
Yeah. Which Medieval Spawn is the coolest Spawn.
He's very cool. I remember
cool Spawn.
wanting that action figure so bad.
I had that fucking action figure. Yeah, still got it, too.
So
Dude,
cool,
yeah,
man.
he's the coolest one.
And Todd McFarlane continued to use the characters without paying Gaiman any royalties or anything like that. Gaiman claimed that he had the rights, and they had a big legal back and forth.
Because the whole point of Image was like, fuck the big guys. If you make it, you got it. You own the rights to your shit.
Right, and so it was...
But also, you wrote the character Medieval Spawn.
Yeah. Can you imagine that court case? It's just like, I wrote this man in question on July 44th. He put the helmet on the Spawn.
Now, figure 1, Spawn. Figure 2, Spawn with a shield. I rest my case. Also, Angela is just like any generic '90s hot chick hero lady.
Right. It was like some kind of it was some kind of angel that was kind of fucking with him and you know whatever.
Well, she was an angel that hunted spawns.
Okay, she was an angel that hunted spawns. Right.
Yeah. She was
But, like,
that
she
was
could
her
have
whole
been
thing.
Artemis or like any one of like Wonder Woman's like weird gal pals.
I think it also added a full concept to the whole Spawn story, that there were other Spawns in history, all of this stuff. It added all these layers to Todd McFarlane's work that I think one could then argue, like, well, I kind of gave him like major story, you know.
He Bill fingered it.
Yeah.
He gave him an actual story.
Yeah, he like opened the whole thing up. So I think that's where the argument came in.
Yeah. No,
But what if Spider-Man had chains on his forearms?
And there was also an argument over the character Marvel Man, which was what was it? Eclipse Comics?
Yeah.
Well, it was Alan Moore, right? That's so. Oh, I mean,
Yes.
if we're gonna unpack Marvel Man, that's like its own. Okay.
Marvel Man, aka
Please.
Miracle Man, all that type.
Yes,
of shit.
I want to know more about this. I was trying to like digest it, and my eyes started bleeding. So yeah,
Captain Marvel, the big red dumb kid, Billy Bastion, Shazam! Captain Marvel was a popular character. At a certain point, he was more popular than Superman because he was like more fun and dynamic, and he had like talking animal friends.
Tawny Tiger.
Tawny Tiger. And those comics were exported to Britain, and then the publisher who had the rights to publish those stories in Britain lost the rights, but still had a huge audience, so they just whipped up Marvel Man. And he was like basically like a kid. He says like the magic word. He becomes Marvel Man. He has like all these sidekicks like Kid Marvel Man and like and all this
Man Marvel Man and Woman Marvel Man.
But it was like a shot for shot like just reskin of Captain Marvel, and it was pretty. It still did well. It had a place in all these characters' hearts. And Eclipse Comics kind of, I don't know whether they had the rights to it originally, but they rebooted it, and Alan Moore basically, I think it is like the first like what's the word, deconstruction of a classic superhero story, like adding fucked up elements. Like
that was Alan Moore's thing. Was Alan Moore the first guy that really was doing that in comic books?
I think it's just by sheer chronological happenstance. Like comics had been around that long, and like that generation had grown up enough that
they have a point of reference, so they can start to that
they know enough about the source material and the themes that emerged from it to actually like kind of undercut it and like change it and adapt it.
Well, there was other guys working on it, like Rick Veitch did a lot of really cool shit around the same time as Watchmen, but it was also all independent stuff, and also a lot more fucked up, like where it was essentially like he did this book called Brat Pack, which is amazing, but what it pretty much is that what is it? The Justice League is a localized pedophile ring, and all of the kids that like come in and out of like all the sidekicks are pretty
not
much
Sandy.
Yeah.
Anyone but Sandy.
Like all the sidekicks are like shuttled into these superheroes by like the local Catholic church, and it's dark as fuck. Like
I've
the cover,
never heard of this.
You've never heard of Brat Pack?
Never.
Oh, dude, it's great. Like the cover is so disturbing. It's a fucking kid. All you see is like just the leg of a kid, and he's shaving his legs, and he actually is cutting it, and he's like got his mask like hanging out of his mouth. It's real. Like Brat Pack's fucking disgusting, but it's awesome.
Cool. Well, so it's hard to follow that, Marcus. But it's, so Gaiman ended up, that was actually Gaiman's first comic book experience, is he ended up picking up Miracle Man, formerly known as Marvel Man, after Moore finished his run of the series. And then the publisher Eclipse folded, and then Todd McFarlane later, bizarrely enough, ended up buying the rights to it or something like that for $25,000.
Yeah, there was some weird shit
kind of thing.
It's an extremely complicated case.
It's a very complicated case.
And,
so
and
I
it
had
was running
really...
for decades.
Yeah. Because I think he wanted to reboot it in like a badass fucking tubular way where like, Miracle Man was fucking rode a surfboard. And then there was a big legal dispute over that. So it's like a two-pronged legal dispute that I think is like coincidence, right? I mean, they just both seem to kind of come together, right?
There was a falling out. Everything like kind of coalesced where like Marvel ended up getting the rights to Miracle Man because Marvel Man, even though DC technically still owns Captain Marvel and like everything's crazy there. Whew. And then Marvel got the rights to Angela and all those characters. So like it was for a weird time. They're like, fucking, we got Image characters now. They're not good, but fucking this is fucking crazy. But
Gaiman ended up winning.
Yeah, Gaiman won when all is said and done.
That's the story. That's the end of that story right there. Gaiman, of course he won.
Yeah.
Todd McFarlane's, because it's like Gaiman probably had like smart lawyers, and Todd McFarlane probably just had muscle men that he picked up on the way there to defend him. You know what I'm saying?
Your Honor, as the representative of the Venice Beach law firm, I need you to check out this evidence, right bicep, and this evidence.
Put the guns down, sir. Please put the guns down.
Then, like, Neil Gaiman on the steps is like, a poem of winter, a lovely kiss. The darkness envelops us, and yet we smile. Not guilty.
Not guilty. Going back to the books, the boring fucking books. No. I really enjoyed Good Omens. It's of course about the apocalypse, essentially a comedy about the apocalypse is I guess the best way to sum it up. It's pretty great. It's about the birth of the son of Satan, the coming of the end times, the four horsemen of the apocalypse. I think one of my favorite subplots is a mix-up in a small county hospital on the day of the birth of the growth of the Antichrist. And so Adam ends up growing up with the wrong family. And he's totally the Antichrist and has all these crazy powers, but he's brought up in like a traditional home.
Yeah, and they keep waiting for the powers of the Antichrist to manifest, and just this like regular fucking kid that's
Good
growing up
Omens. I just got the title.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah, that's growing up in like a Satanist family, but he's just like, I don't know.
American Gods was super big too. That was
American Gods was great.
American Gods was huge. That's definitely the centerpiece, and it really, really is a phenomenal read. Yeah. That's the only other one I've actually read. Unfortunately, I can't talk at length about the other ones, but it's what can I say? The old gods against the new. Just pick it up and read it.
What's a new god and what's an old god in that universe?
Like the old god would be Odin, and a new god would be like the new god of technology was like a big fat kid with pimples and shit. It's like you can't stand against us. But then there was like a god of highway, a god of telephone. Like it's like pretty much the sort of things that we worship now that don't actually have names.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's really, really fucking good.
It's like a god of celebrity that appears as Marilyn Monroe and stuff
it's
like
very
that.
smart. It's very well written, and it'll probably get you laid if you recommend it to like a girl you like.
Yeah. Well, until the TV show comes out, and then it won't be cool anymore.
No, and then it won't be cool anymore. Some other the other books he wrote, Neverwhere. I will recommend that as it's about like sort of magic in London's underground. There is a really fantastic BBC radio play that they made. It's in several parts. I think you can find it online. I found it online somewhere and listened to it, and it was phenomenal. Great voice acting, really well done. It was wonderfully adapted. It's really wonderful. And then Stardust, which is kind of written more in a Tolkien-ish fashion, which is written about, and it's the adventures of a young man from the village of Wall, which borders the magical land of Fairy.
You might remember Stardust as the most laughably underperforming fantasy film until Pan had come out.
I need to see it.
With Michelle Pfeiffer, right?
Yeah.
What happened to her?
She got eaten by a piano.
The Graveyard Book, which is it a children's book?
Graveyard Book?
It's supposed to be like the Jungle Book, but instead of animals, it's like ghouls.
Follows the adventures of a boy named Bod after his family is murdered and he is left to be brought up by a graveyard.
He's got brought up by a graveyard?
Yes, brought up. I need to read it, honestly. That was of all these books. And then The Ocean at the End of the Lane follows an unnamed man who returns to his hometown for a funeral and remembers events that began 40 years earlier. Those are the books he wrote.
There's also, he's done some film stuff that's actually
I loved
hit or miss.
I loved Coraline.
I loved Coraline as well. It's actually my primary experience with the work. I never actually read it, but it was maybe one of the best animated films I saw. I saw it in 3D, which at the time was mind. It was like that Avatar era where it was actually that was enough of a draw.
Yeah, I missed the 3D experience. I saw it at home with my lady love, but we had a great time.
And this actually, while doing a little bit of research for this hit me super hard. he wrote the English localized screenplay for Princess Mononoke.
Yeah.
Which was like, it's still like one of my top 5 favorite movies with the dub.
That's
it's
crazy.
So good.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's my favorite Ghibli movie, and like they nail the tone and like the awe.
So he translated it?
He got a translation and then localized it and adapted it for an American audience.
Man, Neil Gaiman.
Without
cool.
he didn't change anything like major, but like if something was phrased specifically, he like would make it sound a little more poetic and like flowy for our sensitive white ears.
You know, that's what I'm
just
saying.
Everything about it's amazing that he's married to Amanda Palmer, because everything about Neil Gaiman is designed to get you laid by girls who listen to the Dresden Dolls.
Yes, it's so true.
Yeah.
And Tori Amos.
Yeah, and Tori Amos. Yeah,
know?
it's all geared towards those types of girls.
That's it. That's what it's for. And those types of girls are every girl. Yeah. That's why we'll get you laid by every girl.
That's the duality of. That's why like some people like really don't like him. Like even we made fun of Todd McFarlane, but there were tons of people in the comics community that were like, fuck Neil Gaiman. It's this weird, like, he's super slick and like super like that dude in college that he resented because he seemed to be just as effeminate as you but still got laid. And like, but his shit's good. You can't be mad because he can back it up.
It's very good. I wonder what he'll do next. I would love for him to, make a foray back into comic books. It definitely, his earlier work seems really fucking cool, such as the tragical comedy or comical tragedy of Mr. Punch, which follows childhood memories of the narrator paralleled with the traditional story of the Mr. Punch show.
It's really cool.
It's just cool. That's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So yeah, it's definitely a dude to check out if you've never heard of him before. If you haven't heard of him before, like, I don't even know how you're listening to this podcast. It makes no sense to me. It just would seem like you wouldn't even know what podcasts were.
I mean, you're probably just out in the castle in the middle of Wales with fucking Grant Morrison, just like fucking doing witchcraft and smoking PCP.
If you don't know who Neil Gaiman is, write us.
CaveCompanyRadio@gmail.com.
I would love to hear your story because it's definitely a unique one. I feel like he's such a staple now of nerdery and nerddom, and he definitely gets the Wizard and the Bruiser seal of approval.
Bank, 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 bank.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. As usual, I'm the Bruiser, Holden McNeely.
And I am the wizard, Jake Young. Where can we follow you on Twitter?
We can follow me at Holdenators or at Holden.McNeely or at JuliaJohns69.
You can follow me on Twitter at BestJakeYoung, and I also do stuff for Dorkly.com as well as the Drawfee channel on YouTube, so check those out.
And catch me on Twitch, Holdenators Ho.
You're like the only Twitch channel I actually watch because you don't infuriate me.
Oh, thank you.
Goodbye.